Being alone is one of the cruelest tests of modern life, not because of the absence of others, but because of the inevitable presence of oneself.
When silence takes the place of everyday noise, something unsettling rises to the surface. It's not just loneliness, it's the raw, unfiltered version of you that you've been dodging behind busy schedules, fake smiles, and constant scrolling. That's the part no one warns you about. Not the quiet rooms or empty messages, but the sudden moment when you realize you don't really know who you are without the world's feedback. And if that truth hits a little too close, then this video isn't just for you, it's about you. Because what you're feeling isn't weakness, it's the first knock at the door of self-discovery. And today we're going to open it together. Silence doesn't just surround you, it confronts you. It presses against your chest with truths you've been too distracted to face. The things you laughed off, buried under work, smothered with noise, they all echo louder when everything else goes quiet. That stillness you feel at night, it's not emptiness, it's a reckoning, a slow, steady unraveling of the masks you've worn just to feel accepted, just to keep going. You might think you're lonely, but what you're really feeling is the weight of all the parts of you left unseen, even by yourself. It's not about missing someone else, it's about realizing you've been absent from your own life. You've smiled through discomfort. You've kept quiet when your soul screamed. And now, in the quiet, those fragments come crawling back. Not to haunt you, but to ask, are you finally ready to stop running? Because that's what silence does. It doesn't harm, it reveals. And in that revelation is the first step towards something raw, something real, something only you can reclaim. We don't chase distractions because life is exciting. We chase them because the silence feels dangerous. Scrolling through endless feeds, numbing out with shows, drowning in work. Those aren't just habits, they're survival tactics. They're shields. Because if we ever stop moving, stop pretending, stop trying so hard to be okay, we might have to face the version of ourselves we've buried under it all. The one that doesn't perform. The one that doesn't meet expectations. The one that simply exists and feels. That's the scariest part, isn't it? Not being alone, but being alone with you. No noise, no likes, no roles to play. Just raw thoughts, unfiltered feelings, and a mirror that won't blink. And that mirror doesn't lie. It shows you the cost of your escape. The disconnection. The emotional fatigue. The quiet ache that nothing seems to fill, no matter how much you chase, scroll, buy, or love. Despair doesn't always wear the face of tears or breakdowns. Sometimes it looks like waking up with a tight chest and no clear reason. Like smiling when you're hollow inside. Like achieving everything you thought would make you happy and still feeling nothing. That's the kind of despair Kierkegaard spoke about. Not the loud kind, but the kind that creeps in when you're out of alignment with who you truly are. Most people spend their lives auditioning. Every room becomes a stage, every smile, every sentence, a line from a script that someone else wrote. We learn to say what others want to hear. We mirror moods, shrink ourselves, shift shapes, just to feel safe. And for a while it works. We get what we think we need: connection, attention, acceptance. But deep down we know the truth. We're being loved for the costume, not the core. And the longer we wear it, the more the real us fades into the background. Not because we stopped existing, but because we stopped being seen. But the silence always knows. When the noise fades and no one's around to clap, that's when it shows up. The real you. The one you abandoned to become acceptable. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait patiently. If ignored long enough, it crashes through the walls you've built. Not to destroy you, but to wake you up. And maybe that's not the end of something. Maybe that's the beginning. We spend so much of our lives performing, smiling when we're tired, nodding when we disagree, saying "I'm fine" when something inside us is quietly falling apart. It becomes second nature, this constant shape-shifting to fit what the moment demands. And for a while it works, we get by, we fit in, we feel safe, but there's always a cost, and it doesn't send the bill right away. The cost shows up in quiet ways, in the heaviness you can't explain, in the strange emptiness that follows even your best days, in the way you look at yourself in the mirror and feel like a stranger. Because deep down, you know this isn't you. Not fully, not honestly. And the further you drift from who you really are, the harder it becomes to feel at home in your own skin. The act always cracks. No matter how seamless the performance, no matter how polished the role, there's always a point where the mask gets too heavy to hold. And when it slips, even for a moment, it's jarring. Not just for others, but for you. You catch a glimpse of who you've been hiding, and suddenly all the noise feels hollow. The laughs, the likes, the praise, it doesn't land the same anymore. Because the applause can't reach the part of you that's still waiting to be real. And no matter how loud the world gets, your silence keeps asking, when will it be my turn? Arthur Schopenhauer didn't see solitude as a punishment. He saw it as a privilege, something only the strongest minds could truly appreciate. Because it's easy to feel okay when the world is clapping for you, when notifications flood your screen, when you're constantly surrounded by conversation and distraction. But what happens when the noise stops, when there's no one left to perform for, no audience to impress? That's the real test. Most people panic in silence. They scramble to fill the void with anything, music, messages, movement, just to avoid sitting with themselves. But Schopenhauer challenged that impulse. He believed that if you could be alone and still feel full, still feel whole, that meant something deeper. It meant you weren't surviving off the world's energy, you had your own. There's a quiet kind of confidence that comes from this. Not loud, not showy, just calm, steady, grounded. You stop chasing validation because you're no longer starving for it. You stop fearing the silence because you've turned it into a home. That's not isolation, that's clarity. And in a world obsessed with noise, that kind of stillness, that's a rebellion, one that starts not by doing more, but by being more within. We're wired to run. Not with our feet, but with our attention. The second we feel even a flicker of discomfort, we reach for the nearest escape, a scroll, a snack, a text, a task, anything to fill the silence. But silence isn't the enemy, it's the doorway. And the truth is, escaping might keep you busy, but it never sets you free. The real work begins the moment you stay, when you resist the reflex to run and instead lean into that uneasy feeling pressing against your chest. It's not trying to hurt you, it's trying to tell you something. Maybe it's a truth you've buried, a memory you've avoided, a part of you that's been quietly asking to be seen. And for once, you don't silence it. You listen. That kind of listening. It's brutal at first, it stings, but it also reveals. You start to realize that you've been trying to outrun your own voice, hoping the world would drown it out. But it won't. It never does. Because healing doesn't come from distraction. It comes from facing the very things you thought would break you. And in that stillness, something begins to shift. You stop chasing noise and start coming home. Getting to know yourself again doesn't come with fireworks, it comes with quiet mornings where you sit with thoughts you used to silence. It comes with awkward honesty, with facing parts of you that feel fragile, maybe even broken. It's not a highlight reel, it's a slow, clumsy shedding of layers you've worn to survive, layers that once protected you, but now only weigh you down. You stop laughing at things that aren't funny. You stop saying yes when your gut screams no. Bit by bit, you trade the performance for presence. And the more you let go of who you thought you had to be, the closer you get to who you actually are. That version might not impress everyone. It might not fit every mold. But it doesn't need to. Because that version doesn't ask for permission to exist. It just is real, grounded, whole in a way that performance never offers. And in that quiet truth, there's a power no audience can give you and no silence can take away. This is where strength begins, not in becoming someone new, but in finally allowing yourself to be someone true. Rebuilding that connection with yourself isn't about doing more, it's about doing differently. It's about creating pockets of stillness in a world that never stops yelling. Not everything needs a purpose or an outcome. Sometimes you just need to sit with yourself, without distractions, without filters. That's where the real conversation begins. Journaling without a goal might feel pointless at first. But that's the point. Let the thoughts spill. Let the nonsense come. Eventually the noise clears, and what's left is something honest. When you walk without your phone, without needing to document or respond, you start to notice things again. Not just around you, but inside you. Patterns, feelings, fragments of truths you've been too busy to hear. These aren't grand gestures, they're small, deliberate acts of presence. And they matter, because every time you choose stillness over speed, attention over distraction, you're telling yourself, I'm listening. And in a world that constantly demands your focus, giving that focus back to yourself is an act of rebellion. One that slowly, steadily rebuilds the relationship you forgot you needed the most, the one with you. Being alone isn't the enemy, it's how you meet that solitude that changes everything. You can be surrounded by people and still feel hollow. Or you can sit in a quiet room, fully present, and feel more alive than ever. The difference lies in presence, in choosing not to run, not to reach for another distraction, but to actually show up for yourself. Solitude can feel like punishment when you're avoiding something, when you're using it to escape, to numb, to forget. But when you turn toward it, when you let it become a space instead of a void, it transforms. It becomes a place where clarity starts to rise, where buried feelings start to breathe again, where all the noise settles and the truth finally has a chance to speak. You don't have to flip your life upside down. You don't need a grand plan or a perfect version of healing, but you do need to stop running. Because every time you avoid the silence, bury the feeling, or distract yourself from what's inside, a small part of you fades. It's subtle at first, a missed signal, a quiet ache. But over time, that disconnection adds up. But staying isn't punishment, it's power. When you finally sit with yourself, even if it hurts, you begin to reclaim the pieces you lost. Breath by breath, thought by thought. You remember who you are underneath it all. And in that remembering, there's strength. Not loud, not flashy, but real. The kind that grows quietly right where the running stops. If silence scares you, it means it still has something to teach you. Maybe it's grief you haven't faced. Maybe it's a dream you've buried. Maybe it's just you, waiting to be heard. Either way, the lesson won't come through noise. It comes through presence, through stillness, through choosing to feel instead of flee. You've made it this far for a reason. You're not just curious, you're ready. Ready to stop outsourcing your peace. Ready to stop blaming loneliness and start listening to what it's really pointing at. You don't fear being alone, you fear the truth waiting in that silence. But that truth, it's the beginning of everything. So here's the invitation. Pause. just for a moment. Let the noise fade, let the screen dim, and breathe. Not because something's broken, not because you need to fix yourself, but because you deserve to feel what's actually there. Not the version you show the world, but the version that's been quietly waiting behind every scroll, every smile, every "I'm fine." This isn't about perfection, it's about presence. And the relationship you have with yourself, that's the foundation, that's the tone setter for how you show up in everything else. Your work, your love, your purpose. If that bond is weak, nothing else holds. But if it's honest, if you meet yourself where you are, even in the mess, everything begins to align. So, stop running, just for now. Be with yourself the way you've always wanted someone else to be. Gently, fully, without judgment. Because the truth is, you're not hard to love. You've just been too far from home. If this spoke to something deep in you, there's another step waiting. Watch the video on the screen now. It continues this journey. And thank you for being a part of Mosaic Mind.